we proceed to our next panel discussion, which is on sanctions and dark fleet, navigating the complexities of global maritime trade. Moderator for the panel, Ms. Aditi Maheshwari, Principal Associate Renata Partners. Our panelist, Mr. Anuj Govind, Manager Legal Counsel, Scorpio Group. Mr. Darshan Parekh, Senior VP, Marsh Insurance Brokers Private Limited. Mr. Rohan Janardhan, Managing Partner, Rex Lease.
So today we are gathered here to discuss on sanctions and the dark fleet. We have a distinguished list of panelists with us. So the structure of the panel is going to be to address three issues: the legal and operational implications created by sanctions and dark fleet, what kind of operating methods are these sanctioned entities and the dark fleet using to operate in violation of the law, and secondly, in terms of the ever-growing sanctions being administered and the dark fleet tonnage increasing, what kind of changes can we expect in terms of law and compliance to combat these issues? So to start with, Rohan. Rohan, as you are aware, the current sanctions regime, every day there are new countries and entities imposing new sanctions, such as the United States, European Union, United Kingdom, the United Nations. So could you give us a brief overview of the current sanctions landscape and how it relates to shipping?
Yeah, Marex, thanks you for having me here today. And Aditi, to begin with, the current sanctions landscape are regulated largely by countries from the US, like the US, EU, the UK, and the United Nations. And they're largely targeting countries like North Korea, Iran, and Russia to prevent the illegal trade and enforce global security. Now, the US sanctions, which are one of the most stringent and strongest, also known as the OFAC sanctions, the Office of the Foreign Assets Control, primarily, they have a far-reaching global reach, targeting a lot of largely the Iranian oil, Russian military equipment, especially after Russia has gone into a war with Ukraine. Then we go to the EU sanctions, which are particularly on the Russian post-Ukraine invasion, restricting Russian vessels and oil in EU ports. Iranian oil also to a larger section, and North Korea for the nuclear targeted goods. As far as the UK sanctions are concerned, it is post-Brexit that these sanctions have come more into force, more from national security and a compliance perspective, and it largely targets the insurance loss and trade restrictions. As far as the UN sanctions go, they are largely for the towards North Korea, arms and Iran's nuclear trade, but they also rely heavily on member states. So the impact of sanctions, what you had asked me, is largely towards trades, costs, insurance, and all costs have gone up. And the US sanctions are the most significant, and it has far-reaching consequences on US entities. That is a primary sanction, and the secondary sanctions are on US companies that engage with sanctioned parties. So countries like Iran, North Korea, Russia, non-compliance to them with or trying to deal with them will largely lead to vessel seizure, hefty fines, and exclusion from the US financial systems, which many global companies rely on. And then following that is the EU sanctions, where substantial impact is created in restricting Russian maritime trade activities, largely oil and gas for the EU. And also there are strict port bans which are there, and blacklisting vessels violating sanctions, creating further barriers for maritime companies operating in Europe. As far as the UK sanctions are there, it is very close to the EU and very similar policies. And the UN sanctions such which impact but rely largely on member states for enforcement.
Alright, thank you, Ron. So Anuj, turning to you from a practical operational point of view, shipping companies as yourselves, what hurdles do you see in complying with the sanctions regime? Are there any regulatory requirements, any ambiguities in law which you particularly see as a big challenge to comply with?
So thank you, Aditi, for having us over today. The biggest to begin with and the most obvious would be the risk factor that's involved with sanctions and what comes with it. You know, it is not just a monetary penalty, but there are chances your bank accounts can be frozen if you're found to be in violation of sanctions. Individuals within your company can be also subject to sanctions, and when that happens, from a fleet perspective, it can have a cascading effect on your entire fleet. And for ship owners like us who have multiple vessels, it's something that we need to be extremely careful about. So the risk factor is something that has increased with the war coming in with Ukraine and the sanctions becoming more strict. In terms of compliance and keeping up with them, what happens is that many times we see that sanctions are changing very soon. It at times can be hard to keep up with it. So if you've given a certain approval for a voyage basis sanctions a week ago, it might not apply for the week after that as well. So you really need to keep an eye out on all the regulations, all the publications that are out there. And at times the regulation just change. It'll just change overnight. And there's not much written now in the news on the articles till a few hours later. Now, that cannot work. You can't have that period of a few hours of some, lax period for it as a ship owner, because the risk just keeps increasing there as well. Then another thing is that it's extremely onerous, because you cannot take a defense that I did not know that these sanctions were in place. Whether it's knowingly done or unknowingly done, you are still going to be subject to sanctions. These are a couple of things that all of us should be extremely careful about. There's also the P&I aspect. It can severely prejudice your P&I cover as well. They are not going to cover you if you're in breach of sanctions. So you need to get approvals and all that in place from the P&I aspect as well. Now, the point I'm getting to is that all of this takes a lot of time. As a ship owner, you're going to think that, okay, my vessel might have to wait till everything is in order, and who's going to pay for it? So you need to plan at that stage itself, where your contract and your charter party should have something in place to protect you as a ship owner, to say that, all right, we will carry out our compliances, but the time and the costs are to be on the charter's account. So those are a few broad things that I'd start with, for sure.
All right, thank you, Anuj. So, Darshan, turning to you, how do you see sanctions impacting day-to-day activities of a shipping company, especially in terms of fixing vessels and managing them?
Thanks Aditi, and thank you everyone. Thanks Marex for getting us here. Obviously my background is on the insurance side, but we see a lot of challenges coming on the shipping side, and we regularly speak to the ship owners. And a couple of things which you said is that whenever sanctions have come into play, the owners are in a bit of a fix, and as rightly said by Anuj also right now, that you can't wait for a lot of things. So for those, what we suggest to clients is you need to start talking to your risk consultants, your compliance and legal guys, to be well prepared, because you can't wait for the last minute. So you need to have a contingency plan in place. You need to have a sanctions compliance program in place. Something like a risk management, which rightly touched by Sir earlier as well. Those things are very important, and doing a due diligence so that you're ready. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll miss a vessel, which is a good price, you had got it, but you might not be able to do it. That's happening as well. Secondly, what we talk about is on the vessel management as well. You need to be totally compliant from the flag perspective, the registration, the bunkers and the spares. How about the maintenance, repairs? All this plays a big part. So for a shipping company, it's a big challenge once the sanction comes in. So you need to be either totally prepared, and you can't leave it to the last minute. And at least what I would suggest is interact with your P&I insurers, your hull and machinery insurers. Most of our consultants like us, we have in-house systems which can assist you on having better well prepared. But again, it's not 100%, because it's evolving, and every day and day we'll have new things which are coming up. So that's what it is. But as rightly said, let's focus on the OFAC regulations, the BIMCOs, the Interlac and IMO guidelines. Keep yourself updated with these things so that you don't have any chance to say, I was negligent in that case, and still the sanctions would apply to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So majorly a lot of due diligence and a lot of legal compliance is what we are looking at today to really keep up with this. All right. So Rohan, now turning to the vessels which are operating under the cover of dark fleet. what kind of tactics are they using to, evade sanctions, evade detection, and does our Indian legal system have any regulations to really combat this issue of the dark fleet?
So the ship and the dark fleet are using various sophisticated tactics. I can name a few. One is the ship-to-ship transfer, where largely oil as a cargo is transferred on high seas or between the ships, and they use all sorts of complex papers or to change hands and hide the identity and destination port or the nature of the cargo. Generally oil. Another thing is the AIS manipulation which takes place, where the AIS is switched off and they try to go to the sanctioned countries. That is another way where I've seen where they try to. Another is a complex routing and transshipment using multiple ports as hubs to mask the final destination and goods linked to the sanctioned countries. So that takes place quite often. False flagging again, to hide the nature and the actual entity owner, because the person, as Anuja said, it could be sanctioned, the individual could be sanctioned, and or the entity could be sanctioned. India, as such, does not have a robust regulatory network. But yes, when it comes up to the United Nations, customs do play an active role. Customs have preventive powers where they can seize the cargo on sanctioned. I have dealt with the matter where the vessel was seized for sanctioned coal from Iran. It had come through the Middle East and then came to India, came to Bombay, went back to Muscat, changed paper. They tried to change the log entries. They tried to change the papers, the documents which were varying, and came back to Kolkata, and the customs seized the vessel. So the issue was P&I power, of course, was not there, and the coal had to be unloaded. Then again, the question is who's going to bear it, because the receivers put their hands up. So these are some, but India particularly does not have a very robust network regime.
All right. So Darshan, what impact do you see the dark fleet having, like, on industry stakeholders, especially from an insurance and reinsurance perspective?
Yeah, so it's dark fleet has a lot of challenges for the insurance market, because at the end of the day, insurance here is to protect you. And when you don't have the right data, the underwriter is not in the right position to underwrite the risk with the pricing which he wants it. So what could happen is your pricing of insurance premium goes up because I don't know anything and I need to give cover, then I have to provide that. Second, what we see is a lot of exclusion starts coming into your policies. So first of all, you're not aware about all the terms and conditions, and now still more comes in. It's literally becoming a document which is not available for you to claim in the event of a situation. There are claim disputes as well, which keep on coming. So that can have a big impact. And plus, the most important thing is, especially with, as rightly said earlier also, that almost 90% of the tonnage is insured via the IG clubs and everything. We are seeing slowly these dark fleets coming into the play where they are doing it. There is some paper documentation given to cover the blue cards, but what happens in event of a claim? There's a lot of these challenges. So there could be an innocent ship owner who might be colliding with a dark fleet owner. We don't know whether he's going to be able to recover. Yes, his P&I will help with the CLC conventions and it would assist, but the recovery rights for the club becomes jeopardized because they don't have it. So these things have a big impact on insurance, and we have seen that the costs have gone up, the coverages were challenging as well. And when we talk from the reinsurers perspective, as most of you would be knowing, reinsurers sit behind the insurers. So they provide the capacity for the local insurers to provide the risk. But when things like this happens, they might not know that they might be having 2 or 3 vessels at one point of time, and there is an accumulation risk which is going on. That becomes a challenge for them because their capacity is exposed and there's a big accumulation loss might come in, depending on STS operations, or there could be the AIS manipulation which is happening. There are overall regulatory issues which keep on coming. So if you look at it from the overall perspective, dark fleet poses a lot of challenge. There has to be some changes, and maybe later on, once we talk a little bit further, I'm sure everyone would have some ideas at the audience, that there has to be certain regimes which needs to curb this. Otherwise, innocent ship owners will be at stake. That's the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Darshan, for that. So, Anuj, turning to you, how does your company deal with something like the dark fleet? What kind of measures are you taking to avoid exposure to these vessels? And what are the challenges you see with the tonnage increasing in the dark fleet, for your operations?
So you spoke about the tonnage increasing. I'm on the tanker side. Since the Ukraine war started, there are approximately 6,000 tankers in the world, and since the Ukraine war started till date, nearly 10% are engaged in the dark fleet. That's 600 of them, so which is a very, very high number. And the manner in which they operate is that most of their oil is transferred via STS. You don't really call a port with a dark fleet vessel, it's done via STS. So what our company does to start with, we always recommend that when you get a vessel proposal for STS, you first thoroughly screen the vessel. You can start by using any of the online platforms, like Lloyd's has a sea searcher platform, which is very helpful, where you will see that the vessel is flagged or suspicious in case of sanctions. It will give you the AIS data of the vessel, so you know the AIS gaps, you know the ownership structure, a fair idea of it. And of course, you ask the STS vessel for all the ownership documents. You screen it right up to the UBO, because you wouldn't want, you will see the company structure and right up to the end owner of that vessel. Because in case if it is owned by more than 50% by a sanctioned individual, then you will be subject to sanctions as well. So you need to be extremely careful about that to start with. Before you load any cargo while you're doing STS, you ask for a certificate of origin. You must know which country this is coming from. These are the basic levels of due diligence that you can start with, and then you can take a call depending after that whether you want to actually carry out the STS operation or not with this vessel.
Alright, so big increase in your paperwork that way, a lot of due diligence checks again, like ownership, your cargo origin documents and all of that.
Oh yes, it's gone all the way since the war. In fact, for every trade also, you need to screen and get the KYC documents, get the company ownership documents for each and every party that's involved in the trade.
Okay, yeah,
right, so
because it will come from any angle then.
Absolutely, it will come from any angle. So you need to even check, if you're going to any country that's subject to sanctions also, you need to check the load port, discharge port agents, you need to check for the receivers of the cargo, the charterers. You need to screen all the
everyone in the line then.
And you need to check with the lists that are issued by the OFAC, US, UN and the UK as again a basic level of due diligence, and that's all that we can do with the technology available to us.
Alright, thank you. So Rohan, now turning as a lawyer, what legal safeguards would you recommend that charterers and owners place to, avoid, to comply with sanctions and to avoid any lapses?
So the charterers and owners can mitigate the risk as much as possible. There is no sure shot route. There is no 100% rule for them. One of them, what I had in mind is, sanctions compliant program. Bringing up all the employees within the companies to, because sanctions is a thing which just keep changing, as Anuj had said. What may be here today may not be there tomorrow. So sanctions compliant program for the entities which are there. And then flagging of vessels, ensuring that the vessels are properly flagged and registered, avoiding flags of convenience to circumvent, regulations, and maintaining transparency of vessel ownership. AIS tracking and monitoring, using automatic, artificial intelligence to a large extent, which may help, on AIS systems to track vessels, help identify illegal and non-compliant vessels, or rather the rogue vessels of the dark fleet, including those, in the dark fleet. Adherence to international laws is compliance with international sanctions imposed by authorities such as US, OFAC largely, EU and the United Nations to avoid penalties. Audit, keeping proper audits, a lot of due diligence, which paperwork, which Anuj has already pointed out. Yeah, training and awareness, a large amount of training and awareness at regular intervals. Increasing compliance efforts. Regulatory enforcements, sanctions violation, which because of penalty could be criminal charges or asset freeze enforced by national or international regulators. Whistleblowing mechanism, protection for the whistleblower. is something which is very important. Yeah, which I think, because whistleblowers today can ultimately, the intel input comes from whistleblowers. Protecting them is very important. So these are some of the things that I.
Alright, thank you. Yeah, the whistleblower thing, you would say this would encourage people to, of course, come out more.
People who are aware of it.
Yeah, who are aware of it.
Yeah, so that helps in keeping the dark fleet to a large extent under control, at least monitoring them.
Alright, fair. So, Darshan, like Rohan told us, a few of the tactics employed by these dark fleet is, of course, ship-to-ship transfers, doctoring the paperwork, and flag hopping. Do you see any particular gaps which need addressing in this to combat these issues? And what kind of, apart of course from, your assets being frozen, like your US dollar account being tagged by OFAC and everything, what kind of implications do you see for sanctions,
Okay, so I could break that into two parts. So the first part, which obviously Rohan has put down on the AIS malfunction which is there, or the word which they use is spoofing, basically, trying to portray it as a trusted owner, but behind that there is something else. I guess right now I was reading somewhere else also, in most of the AI technologies which are coming into play, we are looking at satellite as a zone to try and find out the exact location of it and try and capture data from that. So that can help this AIS manipulation to a certain extent, bring it down. I don't think so there is 100% for it, but I'm sure whatever is there, we can try to bring it down there. For flag hopping, I think it's quite clear. A lot of people try to, these dark fleet people want to work with these lenient governments, lenient countries who issues these things so that they don't get captured in this overall trade. But I guess this has to be worked together at an international level. International cooperation is required for the maritime to come together and have certain strict minimum regulations required so that these leeways are taken away. Otherwise, we will have one door closing, something else opening up. So there is that part as well. Thirdly, in terms of STS, as we all know, mostly it's done for oil as a commodity which is happening. So we can have anti-STS operations whereby we are tracking the tanker throughout, if you know. So if we get that details, then it's possibly that we are not missing out. But again, whenever it happens in international waters, it's very difficult to find that out. So these things are there. There are gaps which we feel, but I guess it's better than before. But yes, there is a lot of improvement which can be done with the help of technology and regulatory framework. These can be adhered to. In terms of sanctions impacting, I think that's a big issue. Like if you look at it, when things happened to Russia, when the war happened and RUP, sanctions on Russia put them into a big challenging position. A lot of people migrated out to Dubai. They didn't want to put the money inside. The foreign direct investment comes to a halt. You had these challenges of overall inflation going up. A lot of challenges happened. Same thing. This is only from the economic point of view, but when you look at it, you will be having from the humanitarian point of view as well. There are these, just an example, like Ukraine is biggest exporter for grains, and you would not be able to trade out kind of thing. So there are these things. So sanctions is, when it's applied, it can have a very bad impact, but I think it should be targeted sanctions rather than totally applied, because there is these certain factors where poverty can come in. Suddenly your good resources, you're a natural resources provider, and suddenly you might not utilize it and it's becoming bad day by day. You start losing that resources of yours. So these can have an impact on it, and it can have a very negative impact in terms of overall. So impact on sanctions can be managed out with certain targeted bases, and also at the same time look at penalizing the people and make it strong so that no one else does that thing. So this is what I can say.
Alright, thank you. So, Anuj, this is possibly something you deal on a daily basis with, and like you've already told us, do your due diligence really thoroughly in the current climate, being governed by sanctions. So, what advice or due diligence would you generally recommend, as a basic possibly for your operations team to factor in when maybe getting into some sort of business arrangement, chartering a vessel or anything, including any warranties, guarantees do you see taking from other parties,
Well, yeah, there is, before you fix a vessel at the pre-fixture stage, what I would always say is that screen all your parties at that stage itself. Get your KYC documents, get your ultimate beneficiary ownership documents in place, screen every UBO who has more than 50% stake in that company, which normally happens at the KYC stage as well. There's nothing new that sanctions has brought up on this, but it's just that you need to keep in mind that, you know, you need to check the list of the SDN individuals who are the sanctioned list of the sanctioned individuals as well on the OFAC, US, UK and UN websites to start with. You know, that's a basic level where you at least start with. You know, then you need to inform your PNI club. You know, they have a questionnaire where you need to fill and you need to get that done as well. So if all this is done in the prefixture stage itself, that is you know, always going to be extremely good for you. You know, you're not stuck after that mid-voyage or in the middle of your operation. As far as STS is concerned, as I always said, as I've already said earlier, you know, you look at platforms to start with again, ask for documents, ask for the certificate of origin of the cargo, which is very important at any stage in today's climate for sure. I'm also from the tanker trade, so yeah, it's something that is always at the back of my head. And yeah, I think if you've been able to do this basic level, then you should be good to go. That's what I would always say.
Great, thank you. So, Anuj and Darshan, of course, legal costs would increase, like you all have said, because the compliance has become very stringent, you know, and this is something I think it's no longer an option. You have to do it, because otherwise it's going to lead to a bigger issue. In terms of insurance also, you mentioned that premiums are skyrocketing now and there are a lot of challenges. Apart from that, are there any like operational costs that you see that are being incurred, you know, because of complying with sanctions or because of this dark fleet?
Take this a little bit. So I think from the operation cost point of view, yes, you have to look at it because you might have to take a different route. So then what used to go via the sanctions, you have to move out the route because of XYZ reasons. So that is there. Cargo inspection cost also just increases. Previously it never used to be there. So those from the insurance point of view. Also there is increased vigilance which is there. So there's a lot of time which used to be spent by the insurance companies or the underwriters is increased further up because they have to take compliance approvals either from their head office or anyone. So that delays the process, we lose out the opportunity, the premium is increasing, so it's having a direct impact all end to end from that perspective. And also what we feel is when these people do that, there is a competitive disadvantage for the innocent owners because here they are paying additional legal and compliance fees and they are doing it, and here someone is trying to find a loophole out of it. So instead it's becoming more costlier for him, the reduction in trade volumes because the pricing someone is doing at a half price which is there. There is the pressure of reputation risk as well because no one wants to be associated with sanctions or have your name been there because that blocks all your finances, all your visas, travel, everything.
Correct.
So there is a big operational cover cost which goes up throughout of this. Maybe Anuj, you want to add something?
Thanks Darshan, you covered quite a bit, but also in the operational part of it, from a legal standpoint, you know, it's a lot more paperwork. You know, you sometimes might go to external lawyers as well to get an opinion, so you have those costs, but it's not very big. You know, the big costs that will come in are when you suffer delays, waiting for approvals.
Okay.
Right. So if you're waiting for the papers to come or you're waiting for approvals or you're screening the parties, it can take between hours to days. So from a ship owner's perspective, it's only that once again, who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
You know, so as long as you're able to cover yourself in your contract, in your charter party for those costs, you're good to go and you won't suffer a very big jolt throughout this entire process.
Are you seeing a lot of these clauses being put like basically to apportion this time, like you're saying that who's going to pay for this time, you know, I'm undertaking such an elaborate exercise to do the due diligence, etc. Are you seeing a lot of these clauses being used now?
Yeah, there's a lot into play. BIMCO has a standard clause as well, and parties have made their own amendments and changes, you know, to the clause itself with the changing climate and the scenario. But yes, the clauses are into play.
All right, thank you. So, Rohan, to you, with these sanctions regime, changing constantly and like the dark fleet increasing, what role do you see for our maritime legal community to, how is it going to evolve with it to ensure that there's compliance with all of this?
So, trying to frame a better and robust regulatory regime, in conjunction with the government is something which is important, largely. And I think professionals should work and get much more clearer sanctions. Clarity on sanctions will be very helpful. Another thing is technological integration, where with the support of AI and blockchain and other technologies for better monitoring of vessels and cargo to detect the dark fleet operations and prevent violations. Liability management, so legal experts could help in managing the risk and liabilities by advising on contracts, insurance and compliance with something which Anuj has already touched upon. Crew protection, that is extremely important. Legal safeguards to ensure that the safety of the rights of the crew on sanctioned or dark fleets, including disembarkation, wage protection, and getting them back to their, for the crew, security protocols are enforced. That is a large part what I envisage. Yeah. Whistleblowing and reporting again, strengthening that, a good regulatory, tough regulatory regime to protect the whistleblowers. And general litigation and enforcement, if you have a robust regime, will definitely help us achieve what we are trying to do.
Thank you. So, like you all have given us what could be done, further to really combat this issue. But given the current climate and seeing how things are going, what do you foresee on a practical level happening in terms of advancements in technology, possibly regulatory regimes, law, to really combat this issue? What would you see as the first measure that you think is coming up now?
Very honestly, Aditi, I wish I had an answer to that question on what's going to happen in the future. If I did, then wow, I think that would be great. But so with sanctions is very difficult to say. There are so many angles, the geopolitical angles in it. It's something that we cannot predict at all. But having said that, in what measures they can take, in fact, recently I'll talk about a measure that they did take in the past. It was the price cap measure in the oil trade, where they did not completely ban it, but they put a price cap. Now, if you ban a product, it leads to more of black marketeering. So instead of banning it, they put a price cap. The last, if I remember, was $60 a barrel. I don't know if it's been revised after that. And right now, I think oil is trading at 70 a barrel. So the price cap, it allows you to do the trade so long as you're at or below that price cap. So it's legitimate. So they've eased it a bit in that case where you can do this trade as long as you comply with this
Price cap, yeah.
And from a ship owner's perspective also, they made it less onerous on the ship owner to verify the price. So they've got this attestation procedure for tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3 companies. Now, P&I clubs and ship owners come under tier 3, where they can just act on the basis of a declaration that is made by tier 1 or tier 2 saying that this is at or below the price cap.
Okay, just basis that they can.
Right. So, as a ship owner, I don't have to verify the price cap because I have the declaration. And in case of a misdeclaration, the onus is on the tier 1, the tier 2 company who given that.
Okay.
But having said that, you still have to do your entire due diligence to screen every party. Because while this takes care of the price, it doesn't take care of whether you are dealing with a sanctioned individual or company or not. So that still goes on. That was something that I think last Feb or March of 23 is when it came into play after the entire wind down period for the oil trade from Russia. There was some development in that respect as well. What's going to happen in the future? Honestly, I don't know. I wish I knew.
Thank you, Anuj.
Just to add a little bit, I think what he rightly said, and my first point also was, when you put a sanction, don't put it totally on. Put it on a certain targeted basis. And because what was happening was we were seeing the oil prices fluctuating, unnecessary demands created. But by putting a cap on 60, we could do something. The export started again a little bit compared to slow. In terms of the other side of it, as most of us have said earlier, technology will be something which will take this forward. and I think I was speaking with someone earlier also, AI is the game forward in terms of it, because we're seeing many things can be captured, adhered to, and we can find out. So that is there, and that is the reason most of the insurers and PNI insurers and everyone themselves have got in-house platforms for checking all those things, which initially used to take weeks and months. Now it's being done on a very quick basis kind of thing. So there are certain things, because now the data is available, and the more the data is available, you could. So it's always about feed in and feed out, how good it is. If it's garbage, then it's going to come out garbage. But if it's good, then you can keep it ready. You have the list of accounts, you know what is it, which are the ones. And I think sharing of information among the international groups is something which will also take this forward. So we will realize that who are the bad eggs out of the good eggs perspective. And I think lastly, cyber security is also something very important from that perspective, if you look at it, because this is where we've seen ports getting hacked up, getting hacked. There are these vessels being redirected. So this will also play a big part. So cyber, along with technology in terms of AI and international regulatory environments, sum it up together. If they all work in tandem, easy to say, but if it happens, I think we'll be safe a little bit. Thank you.
From the legal perspective, I think BIMCO have done a good job, and they've come up with a lot of clauses on sanctions. So an adherence to that would be good from my perspective.
Thank you so much. I think we'll take some questions from the audience. We've received one for you, Rohan. So, considering good relations between India and Russia, I'm sorry, this is from Captain Pankaj Kapoor. So, considering good relations between India and Russia, should we really be alarmed by sanctions?
Captain Kapoor, my answer is no. India is doing a lot of business with Russia to such a large extent that Saberbank has opened up last year in BKC. I'm sure, and their second branch was supposed to open up in Bangalore, which I'm not sure whether they've opened up. There's a lot of business houses from Russia which are coming to India, encouraging Indian traders to trade with Russia directly, not with the dollar, but with other multiple currencies. I don't believe there is any reason for us to be alarmed. For us, it's business as usual. Thank you.
Alright, thank you, Rohan, for that. Darshan, there's a question for you from Mr. Harsh Butch. So, the question he has is that sanctions are largely advisory. What would an importer do to secure his rights qua insurance coverage in the thank you. In the event the goods are imported from a sanctioned country?
Sorry,
So, if I'm an importer, basically in India, and I mean, India does not, like Rohan mentioned, does not really have a robust sanction-based regulatory network, and I decide to import goods from a country which is sanctioned by, say, the EU or by the US. But I want to seek international insurance coverage. In this scenario, what are my rights? How can I impress my requirement for insurance coverage internationally? I have Indian insurance agents that will fulfill my requirement. But if I want to go global,
so typically, if you're talking on the cargo side, cargo side. So from the cargo perspective, what we normally do is we do a sanctions check. So now if the entity is within a sanction, most of the cargo insurers would not provide you cover. But there are other ways which we look at is we do the Incoterms change, whereby the importer takes the onus on it. So this typically happened during the case with Russia itself, when the oil was coming. So initially the stages were that we used to tell the clients to take the cover from them, because there was regulations put up by all the insurers that they cannot work with Russia. So Russia had their own insurers like Ingostrak, RNRC. They started providing cover. But then when the government put it to overall Ministry of Finance and PM's office that its amount of volume is quite a lot and we want to do it, so we started with a pool capacity. So something like this is where the insurance industry works closely with the import-export overall shipping ministry. We created a pool. From the pool perspective, we started giving cover for the sea transit kind of thing.
but that was domestically. Now in
No. So for the transit coming from there as well.
Okay,
So
transit.
the pool was there for the overall transit perspective, and there were these regulations still. It's not 100%. The claim would have been paid to the Indian entity because we do not want to be associated with anyone else
Okay.
outside. So that these are the changes which were done from that perspective. And on the hull perspective, obviously the PNI insurers.
yes, of course. I mean the hull perspective, you can't circumvent to an extent beyond a point. Thank you, Darshan.
Thank you, Darshan. So, Anuj, there's a question from you from Mr. Chirag Berry. I apologize if there's been a mispronunciation. So, the question is in the context of rogue owners agents, how can seafarers safeguard themselves prior to joining a vessel so that they do not join a ship carrying sanctioned cargo? Any training, awareness session currently in place?
Well, for the seafarers that they don't join, I think the unions will play a very important part in that as well. I think they could help out at your manning agencies can help out to screen and check whether or not the vessel that they're getting on is sanctioned or not. I think this onus will be more on them who are providing the employment to them.
Alright, thank you. We have a last question, although it's not specifically directed to anyone, so I leave it for everyone to give their thoughts. How does the technical manager of a ship, that is the ISM company, protect itself if the client, that is the ship owner, engages his ship in the dark trade? I think he means part of the dark fleet carrying sanctioned cargo. And what is the impact on the ship's crew?
So, what the tech manager first has to do is that he should immediately terminate his management agreement with the owner if at all there's any sort of violation of sanctions over there. You immediately terminate. Most contracts have a sanctions clause and gives you a right to terminate for that. So you don't want to be associated with this at all. The second part of the question, sorry, can you just repeat that for me?
Yeah, sure. What impact can it have on the ship's crew?
Well, on the ship's crew, again, the crew per se would not be subject to sanctions. We've not seen that in practice.
Fair, understood. Can I maybe just give a scenario possibly for everyone's thing? What do we do in a scenario if there's like a casualty on board, you know? I understand your cover is not going to be there from the PNI because of course it's sanctioned, etc. And there was in the recent past an incident like that. You know, a vessel was on fire, I think it was carrying sanctioned cargo, it was all in the news. So in that scenario, what happens? Because the crew would then definitely have some impact on it because they're on a stranded vessel, possibly, you know, their life is at risk. How does sanction play in that scenario?
If you're sanctioned, so to the best of my knowledge, we've not seen it sort of restricting any of the operations with respect to a casualty or
Life-saving.
Or life-saving or cleaning up. That still doesn't happen. You know, that's at the PNI level. You can have a discretion that you can ask them for. There are certain things that they do make discretionary covers for. However, when this happens, we will highly recommend that you always get permission from the authorities before you do this. So you get a waiver from OFAC, you write to OFAC, you write to the US, UK, whoever you need to be in compliance with, and you inform them of this and you ask them to make exceptions for you. It is not a novel thing to ask for exceptions. It is something that
It's very rare.
No, it's something that happens very often.
Oh, sorry, okay, yeah.
You do write to authorities to ask for exceptions, clarifications. There are numerous amount of FAQs, but also OFAC has a license that they issue to you in case they want to grant an exception to you. So in such circumstances, that would be the first thing that probably I would recommend that you do.
Alright, so this licenses would enable you to basically contract with the necessary people like a salvage company, etc. to come assist you and deal with this situation.
That's right.
Okay, alright.
Yeah.
Alright, thank you so much.
For example, if you have
Yeah.
collision, that is again, if it's no fault of yours, what do you do if it's a sanctioned vessel? So you need to approach the the various authorities to get that waiver.
Correct.
That's the only way to do it actually.
Alright, thank you so much. This was a very interesting panel discussion. I hope everyone had a good time listening to it.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it was very enriching. And I now request Dr. Archana Singh, MIT ADT University, to please join us on stage to felicitate our panelists.